Welcome to The Big Picture. I'm Phil Arno. Last week we had a program with Mickey Kearns, our Erie County clerk, and we were talking about state politics and a lot of waste and policies, and we started to get into the national scene and what's happening with Trump in Washington. We ran out of time. So we decided to do another show, and it's going to be just about what's happening with the economy and Donald Trump and some of the things that he's doing with Elon Musk. Welcome to the show, Mickey. Again, it's good to have you here. And last week we got into a lot of the state politics and waste and hypocrisy and all kinds of things. Right now, Donald Trump has hit the ground running. In his first 60 days or more, he has signed more executive orders than pretty much any president has ever done in his first 100 days or more. He's put Elon Musk in charge of the Department of Government Efficiency, and they've been attacked. They've been attacked for the effort to cut waste and excessive spending. To put it in perspective, the United States, we are paying $3 billion a day in interest on our national debt. That's $3 billion with a B. This is unsustainable. And part of it is the bureaucracy. And that's what Donald Trump is trying to address. And his efforts are there and will probably be painful short term, but will come out on the other end a lot healthier if he can accomplish his goals.
Once again, thank you. It's an honor to be here. And I really enjoy talking about these issues because I think it is important. I'm a student of government. I've served at the state level. I've served at the local level. I've served at the county level. So I think what the president is trying to do, one, when he was elected, regardless of whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, he did receive a mandate. He received a mandate in the election to make changes. People did not like the economy. They did not like what was happening. And what he has done is he has at least changed and at least notified the public, because a lot of these bills, I was in Albany, and you have these big bills, and I used to say, I want to read the bill before I vote on it. I don't want to vote on something. I'll give you an example. The SAFE Act. I was one of the first people to vote against the SAFE Act, and I'm a registered Democrat. Mm-hmm. And many of the Republicans who voted yes switched their votes. They said, Mick, they told me this was a great bill. It's not a good bill. It was not a good bill. Until this day, the SAFE Act was not a good bill. So making our public officials more accountable, making some of what they do more transparent and aware to the public, and letting the American public know where their money is going, the taxpayer money. And I think transparency, and I think they're trying to get to the bottom of, as you said, any waste, fraud, and abuse. There's a lot of good people that work in government. Believe me, I see them every day at the county level, a lot of good people. But there are some people who are taking advantage of their situations and their positions, and those people are going to have to be accountable. And I think that's what the president is trying to do.
Well, I've told my kids forever that, government is there to protect itself. Government wants to survive, and they want to grow. They want to have power. And that's a generic statement. And like, who is government? Well, the people, there are people behind the scenes, not just our elected officials. But you said something that was very interesting. You said that you read the bill when the SAFE Act came up. Mm-hmm. Who writes the bills, number one? That's the first question. Who writes the bills? Because it's not the legislators, and it's not the people that we elected in any way, shape, or form. It's people who are behind the scenes who write these things and then submit them for vote. And the second question is, there's so much small print, if you will. The bills are so long and so convoluted, and I've tried to read some, and it's really difficult, and I think it's almost difficult on purpose.
Oh, yes.
Because they don't want you to understand what's in the bill. So the question becomes, our legislators, our elected officials, just by the very nature of it, they don't have weeks and weeks and weeks to try and read a bill and interpret it and understand it and then vote on it. They just get a bill given to them, they get some kind of a summary, and then they have to trust what they've been told. Is that is that, number one, the way it works? And number two, is that basically part of the problem, not the solution?
Mm-hmm. First of all, to answer your question, I can't comment on the federal level, but I can comment at the state level. I served in the New York State Assembly. I remember going to bill drafting, and I would draft my own bills. And they would help you, but they said, why are you here? And I said, I'm an elected official. I'm going to draft my own bills. A lot of the housing bills, we talk about the foreclosure bills, those are my ideas. Those are things that I brought to them. Now, in Albany, there was 2 conferences. There was a majority and a minority. Any elected official who doesn't read a bill or votes on something that they don't understand shouldn't be in office. They should not be in office. Read the darn bill, do your job. They're getting paid a lot of money to be in these positions, and they should understand what they're voting for. And I would always say when I was in Albany, you're not here to impress or to make friends. You're here to do a job on behalf of the people. I represented the 142nd District. And believe me, a lot of times I wasn't the most popular person. They should be reading the bill, Phil, and don't give them any excuses. They are responsible. They are elected to these positions. They go to the public, and they're given a responsibility. And if they can't fulfill that responsibility, step aside and let someone else do it. When they talk about conferences, I think that there are too many things going on where you have lobbyists having too much influence at the federal level and at the state level. Too much influence. The elected officials should be running the job. And I know in the assembly, the staffing, which is done by the speaker, they have way too much control over the process. So yes, in many instances, you get 2 choices. If you're someone who is independent like I was, you can either vote yes or no. But read the bill and know what you're voting for. And shame on them if they're not paying attention or they're just going along to get along.
Well, a moment of truth. I mean, I have interviewed many politicians, some of whom I got to know very well, and they became friends. And almost universally, no matter what level, whether it's local, state, or federal, these people didn't know each other, and the conversations were spaced out, so they weren't the same conversations. But the content was consistent. And what the politicians say to me is, and this is not for public, information, but they tell me, yeah, what happens during the system is that you get elected with the best intentions. You want to do something good for your district. The very first thing that happens is the party leader comes to you, grabs you, and pulls you aside and says, this is what happens. You vote the way we tell you to vote. You say what we tell you to say. And if you cooperate, we'll throw you a bone and you can do nice things for your district. If you don't toe the line, then we're going to sit you in a corner. You're not going to have any conferences that you're going to be in with, any way that you can influence things, and nobody will ever hear from you. So if you are part of the party and you vote with us, then all's good, and you can stay here as long as you want. But if you're not, good luck, because we're going to isolate you. And that's the way the system works, unfortunately, at basically every level. I mean, am I kind of misinterpreting what I've been told?
No, and I'll tell you, when I was in Albany, I didn't take $1 from a lobbyist. When I was in Albany, I didn't have a party. And I'll tell you, the interesting thing is, that happened to me my first day with Sheldon Silver. And you know what I wanted? I wanted my conscience, and I was sent there by the people. And I told Sheldon Silver to his face, I'm not voting for you because you're a bad person. And I did my job, and believe me, to this day, I went there a couple years ago with my current wife, and a guy stopped me, and he goes, you're the crazy guy from Buffalo who used to get things done. We saved the Children's Psychiatric Center, Senator Galvin and I. Senator Galvin stood up to those people who said, don't make this an issue because the governor does not want to do this. Senator Galvin stood up, we passed the bill, and we kept children from being commingled with dangerous adults. I'm not going to give up the morality because I go to Albany or I go to Washington. And this is the problem. Maybe the problem is we're not electing good enough people to represent us. And maybe we're just getting average people. And it infuriates me because, yes, they want to push you. I didn't have a staff when I was in Albany. I had to answer my own phones. But you know what I had? I had my dignity. And when I stood up and I voted on the bill, I knew the rules. I knew what to do. And I got stuff done. I'm happy to say that I had the longest, because of Sheldon Silver, in between time of bills being passed. So yes, I did not always get every bill that I wanted to get passed. But you know what, Phil? We need better, and we got to do better. And if this current president is exposing waste, fraud, and abuse, we don't want him hurting anyone, and I don't think he's intentionally doing that. But we are wasting a lot of money, and as you said, $3 billion a day, we can't afford it anymore. We can't afford it. So I just did my taxes. I know you're talking about your taxes. People pay a lot in taxes, and they work hard for their money. And if elected officials are the problem, then we got to have a whole show on that, because I'm ready to talk about it.
Yeah, well, it's easy to spend other people's money, and that's basically the job of elected officials. And it becomes addictive, and you know, if the parties are in control and they're calling the shots, you know, the party leaders are in the background. They're not accountable. Yeah. Nobody can point to the party leaders and say, this is your policy, this is your wrongdoing or right doing, whatever. They're in the background. So there's no accountability for the people who are actually making the decisions. It gets passed down to the elected officials, and sometimes if elected officials become sacrificial lambs for whatever reason, for the greater good of the party. And that's the system. I'm not sure that there's a better system, but if we can take the system that we have and improve it, I think that's the best of all possible worlds.
Let's look at locally. Look at Jeremy Zellner, he's one of the Board of Elections commissioners. Think about the hypocrisy of this. So on one hand, in this hand, he gets paid to be the Board of Elections commissioner. On the other hand, he's head of the Erie County Democratic Party, which has a lot of sways. I co-sponsored a bill with a former colleague of mine, Assemblyman Thomas Abenati. That is wrong. There's something, look up the word conflict. That is a major conflict. We have been letting our elected officials conflict our issues, and you have Jeremy Zellner, like a pig at the trough, you know, eating over here on one hand. He's not hungry enough. He's got to get more money over here for the Democratic Party, and telling some of those officials, filling vacancies on the legislature. Now, you get your job from Jeremy Zellner. Do you think you're going to go against him? So when the time comes for his reappointment to the Board of Elections, do you think they're going to vote for him? This is our problem. Self-interest. Yeah. Self-interest.
Well, we're out of time for this segment. If Jeremy Zellner wants to come in and
I'd love to talk with him.
If he wants to come in and talk,
I'd love to have him come in.
We'll give him the airtime. It's only fair, and he can tell, you know, what goes on in his mind and his position. And
there's not much there, Phil.
And we'll go from there. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to The Big Picture. My guest is Mickey Kearns, Erie County Clerk, and we're talking about politics and government and good government and not so good government. Let's talk about what Trump is doing. First of all, the thing that gets the most attention is the government waste, Elon Musk, and the government efficiency. There's also things that he's said that were pretty outrageous, and he opens himself up for criticism. He talks about Greenland. He talks about Canada being the 51st state. He talks about Mexico, and he talks about taking back the Panama Canal. I read something just recently that basically takes all of those subjects and ties them together. The Panama Canal is a very strategic way for us to defend our country because military vessels go through the canal to go from one ocean to the other. It's also commercially a very essential thing for us to get products from the East Coast to the West Coast, and it's hugely expensive to go through the Panama Canal. Greenland and Canada are at their northern ends in a passageway, the ocean, to get from one ocean to the other. It takes icebreakers in most of the year, and we don't have enough icebreakers, but that pathway would be an alternative to the Panama Canal. One of the things that Trump is doing when he's talking about Greenland and Canada is he's negotiating basically a strategy that will make the Panama Canal more competitive and less essential to our well-being. It's a strategy that doesn't get talked about a whole lot and doesn't get pulled together in terms of the ideas. But what I see is there's a method to his madness. He opens himself up for criticism, but what he's doing has a purpose and not necessarily something that is obvious. And most people don't understand that. You hear the news, you know, we're criticizing him for this or for that, and that's what people hear. It's not so simple.
You're talking about foreign policy, so let's go back and think about the Louisiana Purchase and how important that was to our future. Let's talk about the purchase of Alaska, Seward's Folly at that point in time, the Secretary of State. All of these major purchases, I think we're in a time where the Panama Canal, I know former President Jimmy Carter gave that back to Panama. But what we're finding is China and their influence on the world, they have been strategically, whether it's in the Pacific, in Korea, North Korea, South Korea, they are pushing their way in Taiwan. They are pushing their way into these venues where they want to become, they have a 100-year plan, the ultimate world power. And if we are not proactive and we rest on our laurels, we have to maintain a global position. And that global position is sometimes thinking ahead 5, 10, 15, 20 years. One thing that the former president, when he was the former president, and historians reviewed his foreign policy, he received excellent grades. The Abraham's Accords, his Mideast peace agreements. China is here. And I know at that time President Nixon was trying to contain them and bring capitalism to them, but they are a major power. And I think what the United States is trying to do is think ahead strategically. And Alaska, if you look at what are the two countries that are closest at the tip of Alaska, are Russia and the United States. If we look at Greenland, if we look at the Panama Canal, all of these things could impact us in the future if we're ever in conflict, whether it's a trade war or a real war with China.
Well, China they took over both ends of the canal, and they've given that up now because of Trump's pressure that he put on the canal saying we're going to take it back. American companies have now got access to both ends of the canal. China is in Cuba. They're 90 miles off of our coast. It's as you say, it's not so straightforward that a lot of people think in this direction, but China, they subject their population to massive oppression.
Absolutely.
They're a communist country. And as you say, their goal is to dominate the world. Communism, that's in the mission statement. They want to grow and dominate. We're not at war, so it doesn't get headlines. People don't think about the threat, but there's definitely opposition there. And China is the opposition, and they're moving ever so slowly, but ever so steadily to increase their position worldwide. In Africa, in South America, their tentacles go everywhere. Trump he recognizes this, and that's part of his policy. Part of his policy is to make us healthy economically, but part of his policy, foreign policy, is to protect us strategically from the threat, the main threat, which is Russia and China, and the Middle East, Iran. Those things are not necessarily, in today's world of immediacy, those are not necessarily things that people think about. But like you say, we need to think ahead. We need to make sure that this country survives and thrives 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and beyond. It's for our kids. It's for our grandkids. We've lived a good life in this country, but as anybody watching could probably testify, the quality of life, the cost of life, the things that we have to deal with have gotten much more complicated, in the past 3 or 4 generations. You kind of, hit the nail on the head when you said basically 20, 30, 40 years from now is what we're looking at.
Phil, you said that China was in Cuba.
Yes.
China is with us every day. China is on our phones,
Right.
TikTok. They don't have to invade us. With technology, they're here. And our young people, we really haven't had, many young people haven't had the opportunity to serve the military. My father served in Korea, and I know that was terrible, heavy fighting. And I think where we're going as a country is, and I think Trump is maybe reminding us that there are bad people out there. China is one of the only countries that sells body parts. The government can sell body parts.
And where do they get those?
Where do they get them?
Yeah.
They get them from their political adversaries. We know these are bad people. The government is really bad. We can't forget that. And we have to strategically, there's a lot of people that don't like that we are a free country, that we have freedom, that we can grow. And we sort of take that for granted. And sometimes 9/11, just recently, we were reminded when we were attacked by Osama bin Laden. But let me just make this final point about President Trump or any president. When it gets to the president's desk, it's pretty serious. He's not taking care of easy stuff. Mm-hmm. That person is working, whoever that person is, Democrat or Republican, in the best interest, hopefully, of the United States. These are top-level issues. They've been taken up the chain of ladder, whether it's militarily, whether it's economically. And unfortunately, our last president maybe wasn't addressing that. And I just watched a show on George Washington. Even George Washington, one of our great presidents, had very important advisors, Adams and Jefferson and Madison, who are all great men in and of themselves. So this whole idea of the presidency has grown. It's a very difficult job. It's become more complex. But if we don't think ahead to the future, strategically, as you said, where we are in the world, because the world has gotten smaller, but we cannot change, and we have to continue to protect democracy, and I think that's what the president's trying to do.
Well, we have about a minute left, and I see things on Facebook and social media, and there are good people that I know who think that Trump is the personification of evil. That he's a dictator, that he's crazy, that he's outrageous, that he says terrible things, that he's in it for himself and to make more money or whatever. To those people who have that kind of those blinders on, that only see evil, what would you say to people who are relatively rational and good-intentioned, but see only one thing with Trump, and that's evil, and no matter what he does, it can't be right?
Do you know what the great thing about democracy is? He only has 4 years. He's the only president since Grover Cleveland to serve 2 non-consecutive terms, meaning he won, he lost, and he won. He has been given the mandate to put his policies forward. That's why we have checks and balances in government. We're a republic. We have a legislature. We've got a Congress and a Senate, and we also have a judiciary. So one person, yes, executive orders can be signed, but those executive orders could be rescinded. Laws could be challenged. I think people should look and say, judge policies on policies and not the personality of the person presenting those policies.
Right.
And believe me, as an elected official, there have been some things said about me that are absolutely not true. I think I'm a nice guy. I think you're a nice guy. But he is not going to be here forever.
Right.
But the country, God willing, the United States will be here. And I think social media, the hyperbolic language that's used most of the time, people get a little bit too crazy about it. We're going to be fine. We're going to be okay. And I think, but debate is good. Discussion is good, but constructive debate and constructive.
Well, we're out of time now, but a parting thought, you know, and it goes to what you just said. Rules for Radicals, which was written by a socialist, a prominent socialist, and one of the rules for radicals is attack your opponent personally, vilify your opponent, and take his credibility away. Don't argue with issues, don't argue with principles, what's right and wrong, just attack personally, and that takes the power away from your adversary. Think about those rules, look them up for yourself. You know, if you Google rules for radicals, you'll read it. Anytime you want to condemn what's going on in Washington, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican in position, think about what, like you just said, policy. Judge the policy based on whether it's a good policy or not the personality of the person in office. Anyway, that's it for this big picture. It's been an interesting conversation. I thank Mickey Kearns for being my guest, and always a pleasure and always an interesting conversation. If you like this, tell your friends about it. I thank you for watching The Big Picture. I thank you for watching WBBZ-TV. We're your local station, and we count on you to be part of us and our whole community. We're part of you, and we serve you as part of the community. We'll see you next time on The Big Picture.